What if I told you that houseplants don't exist? There is no such thing as a houseplant. Every plant I'm about to show you in this video, hundreds and hundreds of houseplants, never evolved in a home. In fact, they only became houseplants when homes started to get built. So in this video, behind these doors are some incredibly rare plants, some incredibly common plants with interesting stories, and then some plants that, quite frankly, I think you've probably never seen before. So let's take a look. We're here at the San Diego Botanic Garden, which is my hometown botanic garden, at the World of Houseplants exhibit. I've got to meet a guy named John who knows everything about everything in this room. So let's take a look. This place is crazy, and there he is, John.
Hey, Kevin.
How you doing?
I'm good. How you doing? Nice to see you.
I'm doing very well.
Welcome to the conservatory.
Thank you so much. I've been to the place before, but I've never been to this room.
Okay.
And I have to say, I've never seen this many houseplants in one place.
Oh, there's a lot of plants.
There's a lot of plants.
There's a lot.
They're in the sky, they're on the ground. So, John, who are you at the San Diego Botanic Garden?
So I'm director of gardens at San Diego Botanic Garden, and so if it involves a plant, it's under my oversight.
So everything, basically.
Everything. Yeah, there's a lot of other departments here, but if it's about plants, putting plants in, keeping plants alive, installing plants, doing the irrigation, that's all me.
I heard you've been cultivating them for 100 years.
Yeah, at least 100 years. Yeah. It's been a long time.
He has the special sauce on longevity, not only in plants, but in human life. Okay, it's almost hard to figure out where to begin, but right to my right is something that I've personally never seen in person. Very excited about this. This is the corpse plant or the corpse flower, and I understand that this actually bloomed this past Halloween.
It did. We had two that bloomed about 3 weeks apart. And this is one of the coolest plants in all of nature, in my opinion. I mean, just look at the skin.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like this is reptilian, and I expect this to ribbit here in just a second.
It's that, John, and it's also the fact that a plant of this size, this is, you were telling me, just a leaf, technically, botanically. This is a leaf, not a stem with leaves and branches and all that.
Yeah.
And then it's grown in a pot that, quite frankly, I grow tomatoes sometimes in a pot that big. So it's crazy that it can live this way. So what do we need to know about this thing?
Well, it's rare. So they're from Sumatra. There are about 1,000 left in the wild.
Oh, wow.
And you can find them now in cultivation. They're becoming more and more common.
Yeah.
But one of the crazy things about these is that this is a plant that only makes a flower every 3 to 5 years. And then every 3 to 5 years, it's in bloom for 3 days. The first night, it opens as a female.
Okay.
The next night, it opens, all the flowers open as a male. So the issue is, who do you have nearby when you're a female flower?
You can't do just one.
You just can't have one. So you've got to have another one nearby. And so as they diminish in nature, where does this poor plant find a mate? And so that's one of the issues in terms of preservation of just open space, is that there are few plants.
So this one opened, and then there's this huge one over here, which I really want to take a peek at, because this is sort of the precursor to this, which is much, much larger. The color, it really does to me look like someone drew a cartoon of an alien plant, and this is what they came up with because of the size of it. And then the fact that you would say, like you were saying, this is a stem with one leaf, botanically speaking, but it does not look that way. It looks like there's hundreds of leaves on it. It's just a crazy plant. And so when it opened, how did it work? I mean,
well,
it heats up.
It heats up, and the spadix, which is this big middle portion, it looks like a tower, that thing gets hot.
Yeah.
And it goes to up to 107 degrees. And when it would get, so this is a chemical reaction that is making it stink.
Sure.
And so as the chemical reaction would start to happen, we could actually see it vaporize. And we have footage on our website where you can actually see it like smoke coming off of this plant. And when it would begin to fire off all of that chemical reaction, then you could see the smoke start to happen. And then you would get hit with the wafting stink.
I was about to ask.
It would just like roll off in waves.
Is it accurately named that it does smell like I've never smelled a corpse, guys, so I don't know what that smells like, but I have a sense that it doesn't smell good.
It doesn't smell good. It smells like dirty diapers, dead rotten fish, really rotten onions, and it sort of changes the profile as the days goes on, but if you want to smell one in full stink, it has to happen the first night.
Okay. All right, so I see that we have plants on the ground, and we also have plants sort of hoisted up into the sky.
Yeah.
What's the story on some of these guys, like this guy right here?
Oh, that's an anthurium, and it's just gorgeous. It's finally found its happy spot.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I would say to people about houseplants is, if you have it in a spot where it's not happy, try a different spot.
Sure.
So in a greenhouse like this, if we move the plant over here on this chandelier, it might thrive and do really well, but on that little zone over there, it's too dark.
Okay.
Or not enough air circulation. So if at
Something
first you
that
don't succeed,
particular.
they can be very particular.
Yeah.
And you may find the same plant, if you just moved it 10 feet, that it's like a whole different world for it.
Yeah.
And so, don't give up. If you're having struggles, just find another happy spot.
Well, it's interesting that you say world of houseplants, right, as the exhibit, because it's almost like the world of plants that some people decide to put in a house.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not really that any of these should technically be in a home. Of course they can.
Sure.
But if you want to care for it well, at least what we've always said is, okay, figure out where it evolved, figure out how and what conditions, and then just do your best to get close to that in your home.
The plants pre-existed houses. So, they were fat and happy out in nature, and then we decide we want them to live with us.
Yeah.
So we bring them in, and then we
get mad that they're not doing what we want.
You're not happy here, honey. And so what we need to do is figure out, how were you living in nature? Were you happy out there? Did you like more light, less light? Maybe am I keeping you too dry?
Sure.
Maybe too wet?
Yeah.
I should open a window. I hate a stuffy room. My windows in my house are open every day of the
I've
year.
either got some AC going or a breeze going.
Yeah,
one of the two.
I've got to have air.
Yeah.
And so if you put a plant in a stuffy room and you think, be happy, and it says, I hate this.
Yeah.
Open a window.
Change it up.
Change
it up. It kind of brings us to this right here, which I was walking around seeing a little earlier, and it just kind of shows you same exact species, same age and everything.
Yeah.
Grown in complete darkness. So you see what, like some etiolation where it's sort of stretching for the light. You see this is a low light one that's been basically, I think, a light source from one angle only.
Yes.
And so that's why you see it kind of climbing out or growing out this way. And then, of course, you see just what this plant wanted you to do to it, which is just put it in full sun and treat it like the place that it evolved. And so it's a really cool example, actually, of care and impact, right? And then I guess right here, too, with the under-watering. Sure. And then too much light, which I think for most houseplant owners probably is not their problem, but
usually not.
It can be. I guess it can be if you put a really sensitive plant in a highlight area, but you get that burning on those leaves.
And typically, plants will adapt.
Yeah.
So if you move them slowly from a spot, maybe with low light, and you want to put it in a brighter light area, just don't move it all at once. So, move it a few feet every week, and then eventually it won't burn typically. But if you go straight from less light to boom, a sunny window, you'll just burn the leaves.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on this huge wall. I heard you saying something about these pitcher plants up here.
Yeah, those are really cool, and that's really a more popular houseplant than they've been ever before.
I think so.
So they're easy to grow.
Yeah.
They're very cool because they'll catch all the little gnats and flies in the house for you, and they're beautiful. And so, but this particular wall, this is a green wall that we put together. It's got rock wool in there, water flows through, but a lot of the plants that are on that wall came to us because of the federal government.
Yeah.
And they were being smuggled into the country, and they became evidence. And so we are literally a veritable evidence locker for the feds. And so we have a lot of plants here where it's been entrusted to us as literally legal evidence. We can't propagate them, we can't sell them, we can't give them away. They literally are preserved as
it's
evidence.
As if they're under
case.
lock and key at an evidence locker, maybe like a more illicit substance that's hidden at the police precinct or something. It's the same thing here.
Exactly.
Have you ever had, because that's a big issue, right? Especially when you're dealing with the rarity levels of different houseplants, and we all know, guys, how crazy some of these houseplant people can be. I was just at a conference, and it was an aeroid greenhouse I saw, and everything from them is on the up and up, but what they were saying is like the poaching and the stealing and all this. And so have you ever had someone say, hey, we need that pitcher plant or this for a piece of evidence?
We have, no, we've never actually had them come back from the feds yet and actually ask for the evidence back. Usually things get dismissed or they get, plea bargained out and whatever, but we have whole areas in the garden where we have plants and every plant in our garden has a tag. We know where it came from, the date it came in, how it was planted, by whom it was planted.
Yeah.
And then they have other information for us, like that has an R on it, it's restricted. So we know that we can't even give that away to our friends. You know, this is literally an evidence piece.
How much on this wall is an evidence locker?
That probably maybe 20% of stuff on that wall.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I would never thought that was a real thing.
They're cool.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the stuff that's hanging up here. Maybe starting with this. I mean, Spanish moss, right?
Yeah, yes.
Which is,
it is.
I think a lot of people, when you go to a store, especially if you're not really into plants, you're like, oh, it's just a decor item. It's not alive. It's dead. But what do people need to know about it?
It's sure easy to grow. I mean, it's a Tillandsia, you know, in the bromeliad family. And here's really kind of cool. You can see a growth point.
Yeah.
And this thing will flower for us.
Yeah.
And it really grows pretty well. And so it's a great plant if you want to have that really kind of exotic jungle look, if you've got a lot of tropicals. This is very, very easy to grow. We just hit it with the hose once in a while. We give it a little light dilution of fertilizer.
Okay.
That's one of the things I think people forget is that plants need to eat. So when we had the orchid show in here, a woman came up to me and she said, you know, I've had an orchid in my house for 2 years and it's never rebloomed. And I said, well, when was the last time you fed it?
Yeah.
And she said, well, I water it about every 7 or 10 days. And I said, when was the last time you fed it? And she said, well, I've never fed it. And I said, well, darling, what if I brought you to my house, put you in a corner, I made sure you got light and water, but I didn't feed you for 2 years.
Be a little emaciated.
You're going to be a little tired and not at your best. And so that's what happens with plants. And so I think one of the ways that people fail is that plant can't walk away and find a better place to be. You are its provider. And so I like to use a system, I call it weekly, where you give it a weak concentration of fertilizer on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So if it requires a tablespoon per gallon of water once a month, well then give it 1/4 tablespoon once a week.
So you meter it out a little bit more than the average.
Sure.
So for a plant like this, I think a lot of people with Tillandsia especially, they're like, okay, well, it's an air plant, so does it really need food, or at what rate does it need food? So if you were caring for Spanish moss, which you are, and I honestly, I don't think I've ever seen them hanging this sort of well. You know, they look really healthy. What's the ratio? Like, what's the care protocol?
So in this space, and so if this were in my garden at home rather than in this space, it'd be the same regimen, really. And that is that we're doing a dilute concentration about every 7 to 10 days. So that microdosing. In this big space, we either use a Siphon-X, which, you know, mix it in a bucket and then you pull it through with the hose, or we use a dosatron, which is a little machine, and we can fertilize everything with water-soluble fertilizer.
So you just take a sprayer and
we just spray it down. One of the added benefits in this space, too, is we have reverse osmosis water. That's really helpful. It's clean. It doesn't have all the salts that we have in San Diego water. And so a lot of times people have burnt edges on their plants. They don't look so great. They look a little yellow. A lot of times it's because we have awful water in San Diego.
So for those who are obviously not in that position where you can get RO water, a lot of houseplant growers are like, can I water from tap? Maybe I'll leave the water out, let the chlorine off gas. If I have chloramine, I need to throw a tablet in there.
Right.
What would someone do? Because RO water is basically pure water. It's as close as you can get to pure water, really, at all. But what if someone throws it through a filter? Is that better or is that worse?
It's better, sure. You know, in fact, I water my orchids and things at home with my under the sink filter, which is, you know,
like a carbon filter.
It's like, it's got carbon filters and resin beads, and that's better than nothing for sure. And it really makes a difference. But if you're using tap, like this little plant behind you, this is a common house plant.
Beautiful plant.
You know, it's just beautiful. And
this is Brazil, right?
Yeah,
Philodendron
it
Brazil?
is. Philodendron Brazil. And so if that were just given tap water, you'd see pretty soon these edges would be turning brown.
And that's the dissolved solids in there?
Yeah, the
sort of
dissolved solids.
That?
And just high alkalinity of our water. So you'll do a lot better if you give better water.
Sure.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to have a big reverse osmosis.
You have to go crazy with it.
Crazy thing, but just the purified will help.
Sure. Yeah, this is a great specimen. The thing that shocks me about this, I've grown, I'm not going to say even a significant percentage of the plants in here, but maybe a cultivar, a more common cultivar, pothos, philodendron. And I don't know that I've seen a collection so well preserved. Like everything looks good, you know? And speaking of, I mean, I'm seeing something up here that I think, we probably ought to talk about, because I've never seen this in my physical life. I've seen this on the internet, in dreams, in fantasies, but this right here is potentially the rarest plant in the collection, right?
It is. It's probably the rarest plant in the whole garden.
Yeah.
And so, and that's Philodendron Espiritu Santo. And
it's my spirit plant. That's my last name.
That's right. That's your name. Yeah.
Perfect. I need this plant somehow. I need it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, they're hard to propagate, you know, and they're almost extinct in the wild. There are very few in the wild. So this is a very hard plant to get your hands on.
And how was that taken by? How did you guys come across it?
Well, it was given to us as part of a collection, which we're eternally grateful for. People will sometimes include us in their wills, and
really?
Or we'll get donations from other botanic gardens too. We actually exchange material, and so if we, yesterday in the garden, it was so cool. I met people from Lebanon.
Wow.
From the American University, and the university was pretty much wiped out, but they're now trying to turn what was the old American University in Beirut, Lebanon, into a botanic garden.
Yeah.
And I said, we'll hook you up.
Perfect.
Because there is a big organization called the BGCI, and we share plant material with other botanic
let's
gardens.
say you guys are trying to grow something, it's not working super well, and you can hit up a partner and say, hey, would this be better in your area? Type of thing?
Sure. Yeah. Or we publish lists for each other.
Yeah.
They'll say, we have these available. Would you like some? Oh, heck yeah. We'd love some of that. And then by the same token, we offer some of our plants to other people. So it's like a big plant swap.
Does the Espiritu Sancti, if I was to create my own botanic garden in my backyard, could I join the BG? And could I somehow receive this kind of
Wouldn't that be swell?
It would be. Well, what do we need to know? Swell. I mean, this plant, what's striking to me about it is it's like almost the most extreme characteristic expression of that type of anthurium, right? Like
it is.
Extremely thin.
Almost an arrow, like an arrow point, this little leaf. It's very, very thin. This is an epiphyte. It's going to be growing up in trees. This is one of the things people frequently err on, that they don't give plants enough light. So if it's growing up in the crotch of a tree up high, well, that's a good clue. Give it more light.
Sure.
They're really growing in the treetops. And you can imagine if we were in the jungle in Brazil, that thing just hanging there with the roots. And
can you imagine? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Can you imagine walking around and actually seeing it, like truly endemic? Wow.
It's very cool. But on the other hand, and I look at that and I think it's the most valuable plant we have, arguably, in the whole garden. And then I look at this anthurium over here, or some of these other aroids, and I go, that to me is as equally as stunning. They're absolutely beautiful.
Well, it's interesting how the collector market, of which I'm at least somewhat familiar with, I'm more of an edibles grower myself, and I dabble in houseplants, but the collector's market really makes the whole market.
Sure.
Because there's no other real place to buy and sell these, right? I mean, unless you're sort of doing it on Etsy or Facebook or some sort of Instagram group or something, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I've seen, let's just say, I've seen some prices for that get a little crazy.
It's pretty nuts.
What's happening over here with these little mini terrariums?
The terrarium craze was so huge in the 70s.
This is a cool way to do it. It's just, don't even bother. Just put a glass dome
over the top. Put a glass dome over the top of it. You have to be careful you don't put it in too much light. That's the one thing, because, it's just like your car.
You get a greenhouse effect going,
greenhouse effect, it's going to heat up and the ultraviolet rays stay in there. But if you get the right spot, isn't that so cool? It makes its own humidity.
So how are you deciding which plants you're going to be putting under here? Just ones that prefer a lot more humidity than you can even provide in the greenhouse?
Yeah, as you can see, this is more low light, so we're going to put in things that are lower light, higher humidity, mostly little ferns, lemon button fern. There's some leather fern in there.
So we get a lot of questions about, as far as houseplant care, like how do I keep a maidenhair fern alive, or some of these more delicate ferns?
Sure.
Maybe this is the play.
This would be
because they're an understory plant for the most part, right? And so put a terrarium on them, keep the humidity high, and you're indoors, you're not getting a ton of light anyways, and that's one plant that probably is okay with it, right?
Yeah, especially the maidenhairs, they want high humidity. I'll never forget, I was in Zion Canyon National Park.
That's my favorite national park.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And so here is this red sandstone wall. It's 110 degrees. We are just sweating like crazy, and we look, water's kind of weeping and coming out, and right in front of us are all these maidenhair ferns.
Yeah.
They're thriving.
Yeah.
Well, what are they getting? I always say, give a plant what it wants, and it will love you to death. So it's getting the right water, clean water, and it's in dappled light. So as long as the humidity is high enough, it's going to be happy.
Fine.
So so this is a great solution to no humidity.
And where, like, if I wanted to do this, which I immediately do upon seeing it, where would you recommend sourcing these domes from? Because I've never seen them quite like this before.
Yeah, those are really nice ones. So, eBay is a great source.
Yeah.
Look up terrarium domes. Etsy is another really good source frequently.
And then are these
antique stores?
Are these like shallow and wide terracottas with mostly like sort of a peaty moss mix in there?
And with just a little moss and a little bit of extra sphagnum just to make it look good.
How are you caring for these? With the Spanish moss, you can come through and hit it with the weekly.
Right. So we'll pull the top off about once a week. We're going to give it a little shot of water, and then we put the dome back on. And again, that whole idea of weekly.
So you're getting a little furt every now and then.
A little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah,
like truly a microdose.
Okay. Do you ever have to then prune this out because it's going to overgrow its own terrarium?
These have only been in here about 3 or 4 weeks. So if you wanted this to perpetually be like that, you're going to probably prune that every 2 months
propping it down and all that. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you just go through and thin it. So in the 3-4 weeks that this show's been open, we haven't trimmed these yet.
Okay.
So it's fairly slow growing.
Sure.
Even so.
Yeah. Can you talk to me about caladiums? Because this is a plant that I think it's probably one of the more common houseplants that people will start with, because I think they get attracted to the very delicate leaves, but also the vibrant colors. And so how are you because again, like, I've never gotten a caladium to look quite this good before. I'm a little jealous.
Sure.
How are you actually making it look this full?
Well, they're getting pretty good doses of fertilizer.
Okay.
So, and when these things come in from growers, when people say, I don't really feed my houseplants, well, I guarantee you that the grower that grew it,
of course,
he did, or she did. Trust me, they're really feeding. And so you are really not going to be successful unless you're really on a regular basis making sure they get good
With
food.
a plant like this, especially because, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like there's not a lot of photosynthesis able to happen on a variegated variety like this, right?
Sure. All variegated plants are tough to grow.
Yeah.
They are not as easy.
And simultaneously the most popular, at least in the houseplant world, the variegated aeroids. Everything's becoming a variegated variety if they can possibly do it. So are you having then to, like, let's take this one and then let's say this one, right? This one should ideally be in a little bit more light, right? Because it needs to photosynthesize a little more.
Well, they do, but part of the other side of the coin is they also burn easier.
Yeah.
So it's really a conundrum. So if you put it in more light, they burn easier than if it were a green-leafed caladium.
Sure, yeah.
On the other hand, they need more light. So what we try to really do is get really bright light, but no direct light.
Filtered down a bit.
Filtered down a little bit. And then again, with caladiums, that's probably one of the more difficult plants if you're giving it tap water. They're really not, they're going to get very quickly. You can, even with as clean as our waters, you get some little
It's
burn,
a little bit. I wouldn't beat yourself up personally about this, because I've absolutely roasted these before.
Oh, sure. They're easy to roast. But, it does start to happen.
Yeah.
But for the most part, and then just cut it off.
Yeah. Well, when you have one this bushy, I think you can sacrifice a few leaves.
Yep.
Awesome. Any other like little standout sort of oddities? Because I know on the low level here, these are more of your so-called common houseplants, but each of these has its own unique story and unique history as well.
Yeah, there's so many good ones. I mean, so in the 70s, I can remember, so I'm old enough, I've been at this 100 years.
100 years old.
100 years I've been doing this. And I can remember in 1973, I bought my first Boston fern.
Wow.
I remember
they were popular then, though, weren't they?
They were really popular. I mean, people would give their eye teeth to get a Boston fern, and they were, counting for inflation, it was like $8 or $9 in 1973.
Okay.
So it'd be like $100 fern today.
So there was a market back then for plants in a more premium way, like there is today.
Oh, sure, there was. Yeah, nothing like now.
Yeah.
But people did pay a lot of money for good stuff. And I remember paying a lot of money for orchids, Phalaenopsis orchids. Who doesn't go to Trader Joe's?
They're for free now, basically.
They're almost for free. Yeah. Door prize. Welcome to Trader Joe's. Have an orchid.
I know.
I mean, like $10.
Well, you get them for any celebrate. Like some random person at a party will show up and give you an orchid.
They give you an orchid as a door prize. And back in the 70s, I was in the orchid business. So a Phalaenopsis like you buy at Trader Joe's back then was about $40-$50. They were very expensive, and account for inflation on it.
Talk to me about that, because what I've seen is, let's say, the fiddle leaf, right? That got big for a good chunk of time, and it was expensive, and then it wasn't, right? Because propagation never catches up with demand perfectly, right?
Sure.
And I think for a while it was that. I want to say after that it was the Pink Princess.
Philodendron.
philodendron,
Oh, yeah.
the Thai constellation Monstera.
Yeah.
And so it feels like the market is made on a particular houseplant,
Sure.
and growers are like, oh my God, all these people
Right.
want this.
Right.
But we didn't know that they wanted it until some random person made it popular, you know,
Sure.
some trend or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they rush to produce it, but that lags by
And they've
however
already-
long it takes.
They've missed the fad already.
They missed the
that-
fad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
So it's like that friend of mine, Jim Bowman, has Bowman Floral up in North County. He's one of the best growers I know. Raises beautiful carnivorous plants. He's a Rex begonia guy.
Yeah.
You know, for a while, you could give away Rex begonias. I mean,
They were-
nobody wanted Rex
It was
begonia.
it's weirdly a plant that looks so cool, but you got this sense of like, whatever, because it was everywhere.
But,
you know?
but they were everywhere for
Yeah.
a while, and they were worth a lot of money. Then nobody wanted them. Now they're making a bounce
I
back.
know, yeah.
So, you know, it's just hang around.
You know what we need is
it'll
a
come back
plant.
into
We need
fashion.
like a plant prognosticator. Someone who can tell me where the next thing
Yeah.
is, so I can start growing it a year in advance.
100 years ago,
You
I
know?
would have told you, buy Microsoft. No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Screw
So,
plants.
if-
Doesn't
if-
matter.
yeah,
Let's
don't
get
even
into
worry about
tech.
plants.
Yeah.
But there's some really neat plants.
There
this
really
was
are.
really, I remember in high school, I bought my first, we called it back
Blue
then.
star
this
fern,
was,
yeah.
This was called polypodium back
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
Now it's phlebodium, but this was a very, very expensive plant.
Yeah.
I thought, wow,
So,
I have a
okay.
polypodium. Yeah.
As we kind of close this tour out, I have a question for you. What do you think the next one is? If you had to just
Oh,
guess.
the next one.
If you just had to
Boy.
guess, because I know
Yeah.
aeroids were hot for a while.
Yeah, they're still
and they're still hot, but I
Yeah.
feel like the coals are starting to smolder,
Yeah.
right? And the flames are starting on something else, but I don't know what it is.
I don't know yet
I have no
either.
clue.
I wish I knew.
Yeah.
Because I'd buy stock and maybe propagate them.
I'd
but
buy a little home nursery or
there you
something
go.
like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, we
Yeah.
had a vendor out here the other day that they are from Ecuador.
Yeah.
And there were maybe 25, 30 people lined up, and they were all like your age,
Yeah,
Kevin, you know, young people. And they're buying boxes at about 60, 70 bucks a piece. They had boxes full of these things. And I'm going, wow, that's,
what they've said, and I don't necessarily believe this, is that us millennials can't afford a house and can't afford kids. So we have dogs and plants.
there you go.
You know, and we
Yeah.
spend too much on those things instead. I don't know if that's true or not. You guys tell me in the comments. John, thanks for showing us
Kevin,
the tour. It's been
It's
awesome.
been so much fun. Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you so much.
Please
guys,
come back.
You can check them out in the description. This event, if you're in the San Diego area, is still going on. So please come check it out. Even if the event's over, it's a great spot to be in. Until next time, good luck in the garden and keep on growing.